In the vast emptiness between galaxies, where ancient civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, one truth echoes across the cosmos. The universe has no mercy for the abandoned. Yet sometimes, in the darkest corners of space, the most unexpected bonds form between the most unlikely beings. What happens when a creature bred for destruction meets a heart capable of infinite compassion? What occurs when maternal instinct transcends species, planets, and the very laws that govern galactic society? This is the story of how humanity's greatest strength, the ability to love the unlovable, changed the fate of an entire star system. It begins with a cry in the void, a desperate plea from a being the universe had already written off as a monster. It begins with Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist whose ship's emergency protocols would lead her to make a choice that would either save two civilizations or doom them both. Some say love is the universe's greatest force. Others claim it's the most dangerous. In the cold mathematics of space, both may be true. The emergency beacon cut through the static of deep space like a scream through silence. Dr. Elena Vasquez jerked awake in her research pod aboard the U.S. Compassion, her dark eyes immediately focusing on the pulsing red indicator that had dragged her from dreams of Earth's green hills. The xenobiologist had been alone for 3 months now, cataloging specimens in the Kepler 442 system, but emergency protocols were absolute. Any distress signal meant immediate investigation, regardless of species or origin. Elena's fingers danced across the holographic interface, her movements practiced despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The beacon was broadcasting from Kepler 442c, a dead world that orbital scans had classified as uninhabitable 6 months ago. The planet's surface was scarred by ancient bombardment, its atmosphere too thin to support most known life forms. Yet something down there was calling for help. "Computer, analyze the signal pattern," Elena commanded, pulling on her field suit with efficient movements. The artificial intelligence of her ship, nicknamed Aria, responded in its calm, gender-neutral tone. "Signal analysis complete, Dr. Vasquez. The beacon appears to be of draconian origin, specifically matching the emergency frequencies used by their military expeditions. However, the signal strength suggests the transmitter is significantly smaller than standard draconian vessels." Elena paused, her hand frozen on the helmet seal. The Draconians were humanity's most feared neighbors in this sector of the galaxy. Standing 12 feet tall with scales that could deflect energy weapons, they had conquered 17 systems in the past century alone. Their society valued only strength and conquest, viewing other species as either useful slaves or obstacles to be eliminated. Finding a draconian vessel in distress was like discovering a wounded tiger in your garden. Helping it might be noble, but it was also likely to be fatal. "Any indication of weapon signatures or defensive systems?" Elena asked, checking her medical kit one final time. She had dedicated her life to xenobiology because she believed all life had value, but she wasn't naive about the realities of galactic politics. "Negative, Doctor. In fact, energy readings suggest the source is operating on minimal power. Life signs are detected, but they are unusual." Elena raised an eyebrow. Aria was programmed to be precise in its language. "Unusual how?" "The biological readings do not match adult draconian physiology. The entity appears to be significantly smaller and shows signs of extreme nutritional deficiency. Additionally, the neural patterns suggest high levels of distress and what human psychology would classify as abandonment trauma." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She had studied xenopsychology extensively, and the idea that any sentient being was suffering alone on that dead world triggered every protective instinct she possessed. Her professional training warred with her human compassion, but, as always, compassion won. "Prepare the shuttle," she ordered, sealing her helmet. "And Arya, download everything we have on draconian physiology and juvenile development. If there's a child down there, it's going to need help." The shuttle descended through Kepler 442 sees thin atmosphere like a silver tear, falling toward the planet's wounded surface. Elena piloted manually, her eyes scanning the desolate landscape below. Ancient crater fields stretched to every horizon, punctuated by the skeletal remains of what had once been cities. This world had died in violence, but something had survived. The emergency beacon led her to a massive crater near the planet's equator. As the shuttle's sensors penetrated the crater's depths, Elena's breath caught in her throat. At the bottom lay the twisted wreckage of a draconian military transport, its hull split open like a broken egg. The ship's design was unfamiliar, sleeker, and more advanced than the draconian vessels in her database. More importantly, it was small enough to have carried only a handful of passengers. Elena set the shuttle down on a stable ledge above the wreckage and made her final preparations. The planet's gravity was slightly higher than Earth's standard, and the thin atmosphere would require her to rely entirely on her suit's life support. She checked her universal translator one last time, though she wondered if she would need it for a being that might not even be conscious. The descent into the crater was treacherous, loose rocks cascading around her boots with each step. The wreckage loomed larger as she approached, and she could see now that the ship's hull bore scorch marks from energy weapons. This hadn't been an accident. It had been an attack. Someone had shot down this vessel and left its occupants to die on this barren world. The emergency beacon's signal led her to a section of the ship that had remained partially intact. Elena activated her suit's external lights and squeezed through a gap in the twisted metal. Inside, the vessel was a tomb of darkness and silence. Emergency lighting strips provided ghostly illumination, revealing corridors designed for beings much larger than herself. "Hello," Elena called out, her voice echoing strangely in the thin atmosphere. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Survey. I received your distress signal. Can you hear me?" A sound reached her ears, soft, pitiful, and unmistakably alive. It was coming from deeper within the ship, from what her scanner identified as crew quarters. Elena followed the sound, her heart hammering against her ribs as she navigated through debris and damaged bulkheads. The source of the signal was behind a door that had been sealed shut, probably by emergency protocols when the ship's hull was breached. Elena's engineering tools made quick work of the locking mechanism, and the door slid open with a grinding whine of damaged servos. Inside the small chamber, curled in the far corner beneath what appeared to be a makeshift nest of torn fabric and insulation, was a creature that redefined everything Elena thought she knew about the Draconians. It was small, no larger than a human child of perhaps 6 years old. Its scales, instead of the fearsome black or deep green of adult Draconians, were a pale silver that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. Its body was painfully thin, clearly showing the effects of prolonged starvation. Most striking of all were its eyes, large, intelligent, and filled with a mixture of hope and terror as they fixed on Elena's approaching form. This was a Draconian child, but unlike anything in the xenobiological records. The little being pressed itself harder against the wall as Elena approached, making soft chittering sounds that her translator identified as distress calls. Despite its obvious fear, there was something else in those remarkable eyes, a desperate hunger for connection that transcended species barriers. "It's okay," Elena said softly, moving slowly and keeping her hands visible. She had dealt with traumatized animals before, and many of the same principles applied to frightened sentients. "I'm here to help. My name is Elena. Can you understand me?" The translator worked its magic, converting her words into sounds a young Draconian could understand. The creature's head tilted slightly, and for the first time, it spoke. Its voice was weak and barely audible, but the words came through clearly in Elena's headset. Not food?" the young one asked, its voice carrying years of hunger and neglect. "Not hurt." Elena's heart broke at the question. How long had this child been alone? How had it survived in this wreckage? She knelt down slowly, making herself as non-threatening as possible. "No, little one. No fit. I have food, and I want to help you. Are you injured? The young Draconian studied her for a long moment, its ancient-seeming eyes evaluating her every movement. Finally, it seemed to reach some internal decision and began to uncurl from its defensive position. Elena could see now that it was indeed injured. There were several badly healed wounds along its flanks, and one of its wings hung at an awkward angle. Wings. Adult Draconians in the database didn't have wings. Hurt, the child admitted, pointing to its damaged wing. Ship hurt. Others gone. Left me. Said I was wrong. The implications of those words sent ice through Elena's veins. This child had been abandoned deliberately, left to die, because it was somehow different from the norm. The ship hadn't crashed. It had been used to dump an unwanted burden on this dead world. What's your name? Elena asked gently, slowly reaching into her medical kit. Name? The concept seemed foreign to the young one. After a moment of thought, it said, Others called me Mistake. But, I remember another word. Before the hurt time, someone called me ZYX. ZYX, Elena repeated, and the child's eyes brightened at hearing its name spoken with kindness. That's a beautiful name. ZYX, I'm going to help you, but first I need to check your injuries. Is that okay? The medical examination revealed the full extent of ZYX's suffering. The young Draconian was severely malnourished, dehydrated, and had been living on emergency rations that had run out weeks ago. The wing injury was old and had healed improperly, likely causing constant pain. Most concerning were the psychological signs. ZYX flinched at sudden movements, apologized constantly for taking up space, and seemed genuinely surprised that Elena didn't intend to hurt it. As Elena worked, treating what wounds she could with her field medical kit, she found herself talking to keep the frightened child calm. She told ZYX about Earth, about her work studying different forms of life, about the beauty she had found in the diversity of the universe. ZYX listened with the intensity of a being starved, not just for food, but for companionship. Why help? ZYX asked finally, its voice stronger now after receiving water and nutrient supplements. I am wrong. Others say so. Wrong scales, wrong size, wrong everything. Elena looked into those remarkable eyes and saw a reflection of every abandoned child, every rejected being that had ever needed love and been denied it. In that moment, species and politics ceased to matter. There was only a suffering child and a woman who had dedicated her life to protecting and nurturing life in all its forms. You're not wrong. ZYX, Elena said firmly. You're different, and that makes you special. On my world, we have a saying, it's not the strongest or the largest that survive, but those who can adapt and change. Your differences aren't mistakes, they're evolution. ZYX's eyes widened at the concept. No one had ever suggested that its differences might be positive. Elena could see the young mind working, processing this revolutionary idea. Will you stay? ZYX asked in a small voice. Elena looked around the wreckage of the ship, at the dead world outside, at the vast emptiness of space beyond. Her mission parameters said to catalog specimens and report findings. They said nothing about adopting alien children. But as she looked into ZYX's hopeful eyes, Elena found her answer. Yes, she said. I'll stay as long as you need me to. But, ZYX, this place isn't safe for you. Would you like to come with me? To a place where you can heal and grow? The young Draconian trembled, and Elena realized it was crying. Not tears, but a soft, keening sound that spoke of profound emotion. Yes, ZYX whispered. Please. As Elena helped ZYX to its feet, supporting the injured child's weight, she couldn't help but wonder what she had gotten herself into. Taking a Draconian, even a child, back to human space would raise questions she wasn't prepared to answer. It might even be considered an act of treason by some. But as they slowly made their way out of the wreckage and toward her shuttle, ZYX's small hand trustingly gripping her gloved finger, Elena knew she had made the only choice her conscience would allow. Sometimes the most important discoveries weren't about cataloging new species or advancing scientific knowledge. Sometimes they were about recognizing the fundamental similarity of all thinking beings, the need to be loved, to belong, to have someone care whether you lived or died. The shuttle's artificial gravity was a blessed relief after the struggle to get ZYX up the crater wall. Elena settled the exhausted young Draconian into the passenger seat and began her pre-flight checklist. As the engines hummed to life, she caught ZYX staring out the viewport at the dead world below. Scared, ZYX admitted without being asked. Of what? Elena asked gently. Of hoping. Hope hurts when it goes away. Elena's throat tightened. She reached over and gently touched ZYX's shoulder, marveling at the warmth that emanated through the scales. Hope doesn't have to hurt, little one. Not when someone is there to catch you if you fall. As the shuttle lifted off from Kepler 442c, carrying them away from death and toward an uncertain but hopeful future, Elena began to understand that this rescue mission would change both their lives forever. She had come looking for specimens to catalog. Instead, she had found something far more precious, a child who needed love and a chance to discover that being different wasn't a curse, but a gift. The vast universe stretched out before them, full of challenges and unknowns. But for the first time since being abandoned on that dead world, ZYX was not facing that universe alone. And for Elena, the xenobiologist who had always believed in the value of all life, she was about to discover that sometimes the most important research happens not in laboratories, but in the simple act of opening your heart to a being in need. Behind them, Kepler 442c shrank to a point of light and then vanished entirely. Ahead lay Elena's research vessel, where the real journey would begin. The journey of learning how to be a family across the vast divides of space, species, and the fundamental loneliness that haunts all thinking beings in the dark between stars. The UES Compassion felt different with ZYX aboard. Elena had lived alone in space for so long that she had forgotten how another presence could transform a sterile research vessel into something that almost felt like home. The young Draconian had spent the first 3 days huddled in the shuttle bay, too frightened to venture into the main ship despite Elena's gentle encouragement. Now, 2 weeks later, ZYX followed her everywhere like a silver shadow, those remarkable eyes taking in every detail of human technology with an intelligence that constantly surprised her. Aria, Elena said as she prepared ZYX's morning meal, a carefully calculated mixture of proteins and nutrients designed for developing Draconian physiology. What's the status on ZYX's wing regeneration? The ship's AI responded with its characteristic precision. The nanite therapy has successfully cleared the infection from the previous break. New tissue growth is proceeding at an accelerated rate, approximately 3 times faster than projected. At current progress, full mobility should be restored within another 2 weeks. Elena nodded, though she couldn't hide her amazement. Every day brought new revelations about ZYX's unique biology. The young Draconian wasn't just different from the adults in the database. ZYX was something entirely new. The regenerative capabilities alone suggested evolutionary adaptations that shouldn't exist in any known Draconian subspecies. Food ready. ZYX's voice came from the doorway, tentative but hopeful. The young one had learned to speak standard human basic with remarkable speed, though Elena suspected this was due more to desperate hunger for communication than any natural linguistic ability. Almost, Elena smiled, adding the final supplements to the mixture. How are you feeling today? Any pain in your wing? ZYX flexed the injured appendage experimentally. The wing was larger now than when they had first met, the membrane between the supporting bones thickening and taking on a pearlescent quality that shifted color in the ship's lighting. Less hurt, but still. ZYX paused, searching for the right words. Still feels empty inside. Elena understood. The physical healing was progressing wonderfully, but the emotional wounds ran much deeper. ZYX rarely spoke of life before the abandonment, but the few details that emerged painted a picture of systematic rejection and cruelty that made Elena's protective instincts flare. The young Draconian had never experienced affection, had never been valued for anything other than conformity to standards it could never meet. "Tell me about the dreams again," Elena said gently as ZYX settled into the chair across from her. They had established this morning routine of sharing thoughts and feelings, partly for ZYX's psychological healing and partly because Elena was documenting everything. The scientific implications of ZYX's existence would reshape xenobiology, but that seemed less important now than simply helping a traumatized child learn to trust again. ZYX's eyes grew distant. "The flying dreams are stronger now. I see places. Beautiful places with crystal cities and floating gardens. There are others like me, but not like me. Bigger, older. They sing to the stars." ZYX paused, suddenly self-conscious. "Silly dreams." "Not silly at all," Elena said firmly. "Dreams often carry memories or genetic knowledge. Your brain is processing information, maybe even inherited memories from your ancestors. What do the others look like in these dreams? Like me, but more. Wings that catch starlight. Scales that change color with feelings. They move between worlds without ships, riding solar winds." ZYX's voice grew wistful. "In the dreams, I'm not wrong. I'm what I'm supposed to be." Elena's scientific mind raced. What ZYX was describing sounded like an entirely different evolutionary branch of draconian development, one that had somehow been bred out of or suppressed in the current population. The implications were staggering. Were the modern draconians actually a devolved version of what their species had once been? Had they deliberately eliminated traits that made them more than conquerors? "Arya," Elena called out. "Cross-reference ZYX's genetic markers with any archived data on prehistoric draconian fossils or artifacts." Searching databases. "Dr. Vasquez, this is remarkable. Several markers in ZYX's DNA match theoretical reconstructions of proto-draconian genetics from archaeological sites dating back over 10,000 years. The sites were dismissed by mainstream draconian scholars as mythological, not historical." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. If ZYX represented a throwback to ancient draconian genetics, it explained both the child's unique abilities and why the modern draconian society would want to eliminate such traits. A species that could traverse space without technology would have no need for conquest or material accumulation. They would represent everything the current draconian empire was not. "ZYX," Elena said carefully, "have you ever tried to reach out with your mind? To sense things beyond what you can see or hear?" The young draconian's head tilted. A gesture Elena had learned indicated deep thought. "Sometimes I know things, like when you are sad but try not to show it, or when Arya is running diagnostics even though the sounds are too quiet to hear. I thought everyone could do this." Elena's breath caught. ZYX was displaying signs of empathic and possibly telepathic abilities. Combined with the wing development, regenerative healing, and accelerated learning, the young draconian was essentially a living link to what their species had once been and could be again. The implications terrified her. That afternoon, as ZYX napped in the observation lounge, the young one needed more sleep than most species during periods of rapid growth. Elena found herself staring out at the stars and wrestling with an impossible decision. Her scientific training demanded that she document and report her findings. The discovery of a proto-draconian survivor would be the xenobiological find of the century. But her protective instinct screamed that such attention would doom ZYX to a life as a test subject at best, or assassination at worst. "You're troubled," came a soft voice behind her. Elena turned to find ZYX had awakened and padded quietly into the observation deck. The young draconian's empathic abilities were growing stronger each day. "I'm worried about you," Elena admitted. There was no point in trying to hide her emotions from someone who could sense them directly. "About what happens when we reach human space. There will be questions, examinations, political complications." ZYX moved to stand beside her at the viewport, the young one's small form dwarfed by the vastness of space beyond. "You regret finding me?" "No." Elena's response was immediate and fierce. "Never that. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years, ZYX. I'm just scared. Scared that others won't see what I see when they look at you. Scared they'll want to study you instead of just letting you be a child. ZYX was quiet for a long moment, those ancient eyes reflecting the starlight. Finally, the young Draconian spoke. In my dreams, the flying ones face great danger. They have to choose between hiding their true nature and standing up for what's right. The dreams always end the same way. They choose to be brave, even when it's dangerous. Elena looked down at ZYX, seeing not just a rescued alien child, but a being of remarkable wisdom and courage. What do you think we should do? I think, ZYX said slowly, that hiding makes the bad people win. Maybe I'm different for a reason. Maybe the universe needs different. The simple profundity of the statement hit Elena like a physical blow. Here was a child who had been abandoned, abused, and left to die, yet still believed in the possibility of making the universe better. The contrast with the cynical, conquest-focused society that had rejected ZYX was stark. You're right, Elena said finally. But we need to be smart about how we reveal your existence. We need allies, people who will protect your rights as a sentient being before anyone tries to treat you as a specimen. Over the following days, Elena began reaching out to contacts in the xenobiological community, carefully probing for researchers who shared her ethical approach to alien contact. She also started documenting not just ZYX's physical development, but the young one's psychological growth and remarkable insights into interspecies cooperation. The breakthrough came when ZYX began actively participating in the research process. Rather than simply being a subject of study, the young Draconian became a collaborator, offering perspectives on their own development that no external observer could provide. When a wing grows, ZYX explained during one of their sessions, it's not just the bones and muscles. There's connection. Like the wing knows how to catch more than just air. It wants to catch thoughts, feelings, the singing between stars. Elena recorded every word, slowly building a picture of a species that had once been capable of interstellar communication, empathic healing, and possibly even forms of consciousness transfer. The modern Draconians weren't just conquerors. They were the tragic remnants of a far more advanced civilization that had somehow lost its way. ZYX, Elena asked one evening as they watched a nebula drift past the viewport. Do you think there might be others like you? Other throwbacks to the ancient ways. In the dreams, yes. Hidden ones. Scared ones. They wait for a signal that it's safe to be themselves again. ZYX paused, then looked up at Elena with sudden intensity. That's why you found me, isn't it? To help them not be afraid anymore. Elena felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders. What had started as a simple rescue mission was becoming something much larger. A chance to help resurrect the lost soul of an entire species. But it would also make them targets for a draconian empire that had built its power on the suppression of everything ZYX represented. Are you ready for that kind of responsibility? Elena asked gently. ZYX's response came without hesitation. I've been alone and afraid. I don't want others to feel that way. If being brave means others don't have to hide, then I want to be brave. That night, Elena made her decision. She would take ZYX to Earth, to the Xenobiological Institute where she had trained. There were people there who would understand the significance of their discovery and who could help protect ZYX while the young Draconian learned to use their growing abilities. But first, there was something else ZYX needed to learn. Tomorrow, Elena announced over breakfast, we're going to start flight training. ZYX's eyes went wide. Flight training? But my wing is still, your wing is almost fully healed, Elena interrupted with a smile. And this ship has a zero-gravity chamber. It's time you learned what you were truly meant to do. The joy on ZYX's face was radiant. For the first time since their meeting, Elena saw not the frightened, abandoned child, but the magnificent being ZYX was becoming. The young Draconian was growing into their heritage, claiming the birthright that had been stolen by fear and prejudice. As they prepared for the next phase of their journey, Elena couldn't help but wonder what the universe would look like when beings like ZYX were free to be themselves. The dreams ZYX described of crystal cities and stellar communication, of a civilization that conquered through understanding rather than force, seemed less like fantasy and more like a glimpse of what could be. The path ahead would be dangerous. The Draconian Empire would not welcome the return of abilities they had worked to eliminate. Human authorities would struggle to understand the implications of ZYX's existence. But looking at the young being who had somehow retained hope and kindness despite systematic cruelty, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt like they might actually win. The stars seemed brighter that night as the UES Compassion continued its journey toward human space, carrying with it a secret that could reshape the galaxy. In the ship's zero-gravity chamber, a young Draconian spread silver wings and learned to fly, discovering joy and movement and freedom in the boundless dark between worlds. Behind them, the dead world of Kepler, 442c, was already forgotten by the universe. But the life it had sheltered, the spark of something ancient and precious that had survived against all odds, was beginning to burn bright enough to light the way for an entire species to remember what they had once been and what they could become again. Ions catching and reflecting sunlight in brilliant flashes that reminded Elena of ZYX's scales. She stood in the Compassion's observation lounge, watching their destination grow larger, while trying to calm the nervous energy radiating from her young companion. ZYX had been unusually quiet since they'd received clearance to dock, those expressive eyes showing a mixture of excitement and terror that broke Elena's heart. So many thoughts, ZYX whispered, pressing small hands against the viewport. So many minds all in one place. How do humans stand it? Elena frowned. ZYX's empathic abilities had grown exponentially during their journey. But this was the first time the young Draconian had shown signs of being overwhelmed by them. Can you block them out? Like we practiced. Trying, ZYX replied, scales shimmering with stress patterns Elena had learned to recognize. But they're so loud, and some of them are angry, afraid. They know something different is coming. The observation sent a chill through Elena's scientific mind. If ZYX could sense emotions from this distance, the young one's telepathic range was far beyond anything they had tested. It also meant their arrival wouldn't be the quiet entrance she had hoped for. Someone on the station was already aware that the Compassion carried more than just its registered pilot. Arya, Elena called out. Any unusual communication traffic from the station? Affirmative, Dr. Vasquez. There have been 17 encrypted transmissions sent from Terra Nova Station in the past hour, all using military-grade security protocols. I am unable to determine their content or destination. Elena's protective instincts flared. She had sent a carefully worded message ahead, informing her mentor Dr. Sarah Chun at the Xenobiological Institute about her unusual discovery, but she had been deliberately vague about details. Someone else had clearly connected the dots. ZYX, Elena said gently, I need you to stay close to me when we dock. Don't let anyone separate us, no matter what they say. Can you do that? The young Draconian nodded solemnly, then surprised Elena by reaching out and taking her hand. Despite everything ZYX had endured, the gesture was one of comfort rather than seeking it. The child was trying to reassure her. I won't let them hurt you either, ZYX said with quiet determination. You saved me. Now I protect you too. The words hit Elena harder than any scientific breakthrough. Somewhere along their journey, she had stopped thinking of ZYX as a research subject and started thinking of the young one as family. The realization should have terrified her. She had no training in child-rearing, especially alien child-rearing, but instead it filled her with a fierce resolve to see ZYX safe and free. The docking process at Terra Nova went smoothly, but Elena noticed the unusual number of security personnel in the bay. Humans in military uniforms stood alongside the usual dock workers, their weapons visible but not drawn. It was clearly meant to be a show of force without overt hostility, but Elena could feel ZYX trembling beside her as they walked down the Compassion's boarding ramp. Dr. Vasquez, a familiar voice called out across the bay. Dr. Sarah Chan approached with her characteristic brisk efficiency, her graying hair pulled back in its usual severe bun. Behind her walked a tall man in a colonel's uniform, his expression unreadable. "Sarah," Elena replied warmly, though she kept one hand on Zwiax's shoulder. "Thank you for agreeing to see us." Dr. Chin's eyes moved to Zwiax, and Elena watched her mentor's scientific curiosity war with maternal concern. Sarah had been like a mother to Elena during her graduate studies, and her expression now suggested she was seeing more than just a xenobiological specimen. "And this must be ZYX," Dr. Chun said gently, crouching down to bring herself closer to the young Draconian's eye level. "Hello, little one. Elena has told me wonderful things about you." ZYX looked uncertainly between Elena and Dr. Chun, then stepped forward with careful courage. "You are the teacher mother Elena speaks of. She says you showed her how to help life grow." Dr. Chin's eyes widened slightly at the formal yet childlike phrasing, and Elena could see her mentor making rapid mental notes about Zwiax's linguistic development. But there was also something else in Sarah's expression, a softness that Elena had rarely seen directed toward research subjects. "That's right," Dr. Chin replied, "and Elena has always been my best student. She has a gift for understanding what different beings need to thrive." The colonel cleared his throat impatiently. "Dr. Chun, we should move this to a secure location. The situation has complications." Elena's protective instincts flared. "What kind of complications? And who exactly are you?" "Colonel Marcus Webb, Xenobiological Security Division," the man replied curtly. "Dr. Vasquez, your discovery has attracted significant attention from multiple parties. We need to discuss the implications in a controlled environment." "Implications?" Elena's voice carried a warning edge. "ZYX is a child, not a political situation." "ZYX is a Draconian," Webb replied bluntly. "A species we've been at war with for the better part of a century. The fact that you've brought one to Earth without clearance raises serious security concerns." Elena felt ZYX shrink closer to her side, the young one's empathic abilities clearly picking up on the hostility radiating from the colonel. Before Elena could respond, something unexpected happened. "Not Warmaker," ZYX said quietly, but with unmistakable dignity. "Not like the others. I am what they threw away because they were afraid of what we used to be." Webb's expression shifted slightly, and Elena realized ZYX was unconsciously projecting sincerity along with the words. The young Draconian's empathic abilities worked both ways. They could influence as well as sense emotions. "What do you mean, what you used to be?" Dr. Chun asked with genuine scientific curiosity. ZYX looked to Elena for permission, receiving an encouraging nod. "Before the Empire, before the conquest-making, we were different. We sang to stars, healed with touch, moved between worlds on solar winds. The dreams show me. But the Empire said these things were weakness, and they made them go away. Made us go away." The implications of ZYX's words hit both scientists simultaneously. Dr. Chin's face went pale as she began processing what this meant for xenobiological history. Webb, meanwhile, was speaking rapidly into a communication device. "ZYX," Dr. Chin said carefully, "when you say us, do you mean there are others like you? Hidden ones, scared ones. They wait for someone to show them it's safe to be themselves again." ZYX's scales shifted to deeper silver, a pattern Elena recognized as the young one's way of expressing profound emotion. "Elena found me broken. She made me whole. Maybe we can help others be whole too." Elena felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders once again. What they were discussing wasn't just xenobiology anymore. It was the potential resurrection of an ancient civilization, the healing of a species that had lost its soul to militaristic pragmatism. "Colonel Webb," Elena said firmly, "I think you need to expand your perspective. What if the Draconian Empire isn't the real enemy? What if they're just as much victims of this cultural genocide as their conquered territories?" Webb's expression was skeptical, but Elena could see him considering the possibilities. A military man would understand the strategic implications of a draconian subspecies that possessed abilities the Empire had eliminated. Prove it, Webb said finally. Show me these abilities you're describing. ZYX looked uncertain until Elena nodded encouragingly. The young draconian took a deep breath, then spread their wings, now fully healed and magnificently large, the membranes catching the station's artificial lighting like captured starlight. But more impressive than the physical display was what happened next. Elena felt a wave of peace wash over her, followed by images that seemed to appear directly in her mind. Not her own memories, but something far older and more beautiful. She saw crystal cities floating in space, powered by stellar energy. She saw beings that looked like idealized versions of ZYX, their scales shifting color with emotion as they communicated through harmonics that could cross interstellar distances. She saw a civilization that had achieved technological advancement not through conquest, but through understanding the fundamental connections between all living things. The vision lasted only moments, but when it faded, Elena saw that both Dr. Chun and Colonel Webb had experienced the same thing. Sarah's eyes were bright with tears, while Webb looked like a man whose worldview had just been fundamentally challenged. Ow! Webb asked shakily. Memory sharing, ZYX explained matter-of-factly. All living things carry the memories of their ancestors. I just helped you see them. The Empire tried to cut us off from these memories, but they're still there, waiting. Dr. Chun was already activating her recording equipment. ZYX, would you be willing to demonstrate this ability under controlled conditions? Not as a test subject, she added quickly, seeing Elena's protective expression, but as a collaborator? What you've just shown us could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness itself. Before ZYX could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the docking bay. Emergency lights bathed everything in harsh red, and Webb was receiving rapid-fire communications through his headset. What's happening? Elena demanded. Webb's face had gone ashen. Long-range sensors have detected a draconian battle fleet entering this system. 12 capital ships and escort vessels. They're demanding the return of stolen property. Elena's blood ran cold. Somehow, the Draconian Empire had learned of ZYX's existence and survival. The young one's former people were coming to reclaim what they had once discarded, probably to eliminate the evidence of their ancient heritage permanently. How long until they arrive? Dr. Chun asked with scientific calm. 6 hours, Webb replied grimly. The planetary defense grid is being activated, but against a fleet that size. They won't attack, ZYX said quietly, surprising everyone. Not with me here. They're more afraid of what I represent than any human weapons. Explain, Webb demanded. ZYX's eyes had taken on a distant quality, as if seeing something beyond the physical present. In the memory dreams, there are instructions. Protocols for awakening the sleeping ones. If they kill me, the memories I've unlocked might spread to others like me throughout their empire. They can't risk that. Elena felt a chill of understanding. You're saying there are others in the Draconian Empire who carry these ancient genetics? Hidden, suppressed. But yes, the Empire needs the genetic diversity, so they can't eliminate us completely. They just make sure we never learn what we really are. ZYX looked up at Elena with ancient wisdom in young eyes. Until now, Dr. Chun was rapidly inputting data into her mobile unit. Colonel Webb, we need to evacuate ZYX to a secure location immediately. If the Draconian Empire is willing to risk war to reclaim one child, then this being represents something far more significant than we realized. Note evacuation, ZYX said with quiet firmness. Running won't solve anything. The Empire will keep hunting, keep suppressing, keep making others like me disappear. It's time to stop hiding. Elena's protective instincts warred with her admiration for ZYX's courage. The young Draconian was right. Running would only delay the inevitable. But the alternative was putting a child in the middle of what could become an interstellar incident. What are you proposing? Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew. I faced them, ZYX said simply. I show them what they threw away. I help them remember what they used to be before the Empire made them forget. The plan was audacious, terrifying, and possibly suicidal. It was also, Elena realized, exactly what ZYX had been preparing for throughout their journey together. Every conversation about courage, every lesson about standing up for what was right, every moment of growing confidence had been leading to this confrontation. You won't do it alone, Elena said firmly. If you're determined to face them, then you'll have support. Human support. Colonel Webb looked at them both as if they had lost their minds. You're talking about diplomatic contact with a hostile fleet. That's beyond both of your authorizations. Then, get us authorization, Dr. Chen said crisply. Because if ZYX is right about others like them existing within the Draconian Empire, we may be looking at the first real chance for peace between our species in over a century. As alarms continued to sound, and the station prepared for the arrival of the Draconian fleet, Elena found herself wondering if they were about to witness the birth of a new era or the beginning of an even larger conflict. Either way, the frightened child she had rescued from a dead world was about to become the most important being in the galaxy. The stars outside the viewport seemed brighter somehow, as if they too were waiting to see what would happen when the past and future of an entire species collided in the space above Earth. In 6 hours, everything would change. Elena just hoped they were all ready for what that change might bring. The Draconian fleet emerged from hyperspace like dark angels descending from the void. Elena watched from the observation deck of Terra Nova Station's command center as 12 massive warships materialized against the star field, their hulls bristling with weapons that could reduce Earth to ash in minutes. The lead vessel was a dreadnought nearly 2 kilometers long, its design speaking of absolute power and conquest. But what drew her attention was the communication that had just arrived, not the usual demands for surrender, but a formal request for parley. They want to negotiate, Admiral Harrison said, his weathered face showing the strain of commanding a defensive fleet that was hopelessly outgunned. That's unprecedented in Draconian first contact protocols. Beside Elena, ZYX stood perfectly still, those remarkable eyes fixed on the approaching fleet. The young Draconian scales had shifted to a deep golden hue that Elena had never seen before, and there was something different about their posture, straighter, more regal, as if some ancient nobility was awakening. They're afraid, ZYX said quietly. I can feel it from here. Not afraid of your weapons. Afraid of me. Afraid of what I might say to their crews. Dr. Chen looked up from her analysis station where she had been monitoring ZYX's biological readings. Your electromagnetic signature is off the charts. Whatever you did during the memory-sharing demonstration, it's amplified 100-fold. Elena felt a chill of understanding. ZYX, are you broadcasting those memories to the Draconian ships? Not broadcasting. ZYX replied with a slight smile. Singing, the way we used to sing between stars. Some of them can still hear it, even if they don't remember what it means. Colonel Webb was coordinating with multiple security teams, his expression grim. The lead ship is requesting permission to send a delegation. 3 representatives, no weapons, neutral meeting ground. Where? Admiral Harrison asked. They specifically requested to meet with the young singer in person. Webb's eyes moved to ZYX. They know exactly who and what they're dealing with. Elena's protective instincts flared. The idea of ZYX facing Draconian Empire officials directly seemed like walking into a trap. But she could see the determination in the young one's eyes, the same courage that had carried them through healing and growth over the past weeks. I'll go with you, Elena said firmly. And me, Dr. Chen added. If this is a first contact scenario with potential diplomatic implications, we need proper scientific documentation. Admiral Harrison looked skeptical. You want to bring a child to negotiate with a hostile fleet? That's not just dangerous, it's necessary. ZYX interrupted with quiet authority. They didn't come here to conquer. They came here to silence me before more of their people remember what they really are. But they can't do it by force. That would risk awakening others. They need to convince me to go quietly. The implications sent ice through Elena's veins. And if you refuse, then They'll try to make me choose between my freedom and the safety of everyone here. ZYX's expression was ancient and sad. It's an old empire strategy. Make the different ones sacrifice themselves to protect others. Elena knelt down to meet ZYX's eyes directly. We don't negotiate with terrorists, and we don't sacrifice children. Not even brave ones who think they need to save everyone. For the first time since the fleet's arrival, ZYX smiled. That's why I chose to trust humans. You don't abandon the different ones. You protect them. 2 hours later, they met in Conference Room 7. Chosen because it had transparent aluminum walls that would allow both sides to see clearly that no weapons or surprises were being concealed. Elena had never been this nervous before any contact scenario, but the stakes had never been this high either. ZYX sat calmly beside her, looking impossibly small and young despite the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. The Draconian delegation arrived precisely on time. The 3 representatives were massive even by their species standards, their black scales polished to mirror brightness, and their ceremonial armor speaking of high rank within the Empire. But what struck Elena immediately was their behavior. They moved with obvious deference towards ZYX, as if in the presence of something they both feared and revered. The leader, a scarred veteran whose armor bore the insignia of a battlemaster, spoke first. His voice was surprisingly cultured, with none of the harsh militarism Elena had expected. Young singer, he said in accented but clear standard. I am Battlemaster Kethvar of the 13th Conquest Fleet. We have come to retrieve you. I am not a possession to be retrieved, ZYX replied calmly. I am ZYX, and I speak for myself. The 3 Draconians exchanged glances that Elena's xenobiological training read as profound discomfort. Clearly, this level of independence wasn't what they had anticipated. You do not understand the danger you pose, Kethvar continued. Your existence, your abilities, they threaten the stability of the Empire. Already, there are reports of unrest among the lower castes. Whispers of the old songs. Good, ZYX said simply. The second Draconian, bearing the marks of scientific caste, leaned forward. Child, you cannot comprehend the chaos you risk unleashing. The old ways were abandoned for good reason. They made us weak, vulnerable to external threats. No, ZYX's voice carried a harmonics that seemed to resonate through the station's hall. They made you wise, strong in ways that weapons can't match. You abandoned them because you were afraid of not being in control. Elena watched fascinated as the 3rd Draconian, younger than the others and bearing fewer scars, began to show signs of emotional distress. Their scales were shifting color slightly, taking on hints of the silver that marked ZYX's heritage. The memories are real, aren't they? The young one asked suddenly, ignoring sharp looks from their companions. The crystal cities, the star singing, the healing touch, they're not mythology. Silence, Veltar. Kethvar snapped. You were instructed not to. They're real, ZYX said gently, directing their words to the young Draconian. And they're still inside you, waiting to wake up? All of you. Veltar's scales were shifting rapidly now, cycling through colors that Elena suspected hadn't been seen in Draconian space for centuries. I've had dreams. We all have. But the neural conditioning is supposed to suppress. Neural conditioning can be overcome, Dr. Chun interjected quietly, especially when genetic memories are as strong as what ZYX carries. Kethvar's expression had grown dangerous. Human doctor, you speak of things beyond your understanding. The conditioning exists to prevent precisely this kind of regression. It's not regression, Elena said firmly. It's evolution. What your empire calls weakness, science calls adaptation. The abilities ZYX displays aren't primitive throwbacks. They're advanced biological capabilities that could revolutionize interstellar civilization. At the cost of military discipline and social order, the scientist countered. The old ways made individual Draconians powerful, yes, but they also made them impossible to govern. Each one became a law unto themselves. Maybe, ZYX said quietly, that's what the universe needs. Not governed people, but free people who choose to work together. The simple statement hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Draconian Empire represented. Elena could see the conflict playing out on Veltar's face, and she suspected similar struggles were happening throughout the fleet as ZYX's star song continued to awaken suppressed memories. "You cannot be allowed to return to our space," HFY said finally. "But neither can you remain here broadcasting your influence. The High Command has authorized me to offer terms." Elena said. Here it came, the moment where they would demand ZYX's freedom in exchange for not attacking Earth. "Speak your terms." Admiral Harrison's voice came through the communication system. Elena had almost forgotten the human officials were monitoring the meeting. "The young singer will accompany us to a neutral world in the frontier zone. There, they will be given a habitat suited to their needs, protection from those who might wish them harm, and freedom to live as they choose, as long as they cease broadcasting the awakening songs." "No," Elena said immediately. "ZYX is not going anywhere without proper representation and guarantees of safety. And I'm not going anywhere without Elena," ZYX added firmly. "She's my family now." The word family seemed to hit the Draconians like a physical blow. Veltar actually stepped back, while the scientist made notes on a device Elena couldn't identify. "Humans do not mate with Draconians," HFY said, confusion clear in his voice. "Family isn't about mating," Elena replied. "It's about caring for each other, protecting each other, helping each other grow. Concepts your empire seems to have forgotten along with the star songs. You would leave your species to live among ours?" Veltar asked wonderingly. "Even knowing the dangers?" Elena looked at ZYX, seeing not an alien research subject, but a brilliant, brave, impossibly precious child who had already taught her more about courage and hope than years of academic study. "Yes," she said simply, "I would." The effect on the Draconian delegation was immediate and profound. Veltar's scales burst into cascades of silver and gold that matched ZYX's coloring. The scientist stopped taking notes and stared openly. Even HFY seemed shaken by the simple declaration. "This complicates matters," the Battlemaster admitted. "Human emotional bonds were not calculated into our negotiation parameters." "Maybe that's the problem with your parameters," Dr. Chen observed. "You're trying to solve an emotional and spiritual crisis with military tactics." ZYX stood up suddenly, their small form somehow commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "I'll make a counteroffer. I'll come with you, but not as a prisoner or exile. I'll come as a teacher. I'll help others like me remember what we were meant to be. And Elena comes with me as my family and protector." "Impossible," HFY said immediately. "The High Command would never." "The High Command is already losing control," ZYX interrupted, their voice carrying harmonics that made the station's walls vibrate subtly. "I can feel the awakening spreading through your fleet even now. How many of your crews are having the memory dreams? How many are starting to remember that there's more to existence than conquest and control?" Elena watched Veltar's face cycle through emotions she was learning to read in Draconian expressions. The young one was clearly fighting an internal battle between duty and awakening awareness. 17 ships have reported discipline irregularities since we arrived in this system," Veltar said quietly, earning a sharp look from HFY. "Crew members requesting permission to sing. Officers questioning combat protocols. One navigator has been attempting to plot courses using stellar harmonics instead of standard mathematics." "Veltar," the Battlemaster snapped. "The truth serves us better than denial," Veltar replied with growing confidence. "The young singer is right. The awakening cannot be stopped with weapons or threats. It can only be guided." Elena felt hope stirring in her chest. If there were others in the fleet experiencing the same kind of growth ZYX had shown, then perhaps this confrontation could become something more positive than a standoff. "What are you suggesting?" Dr. Chen asked. Veltar looked directly at ZYX. "Let me take you to see Captain SYX Ren of the Fourth Wing. Her ship carries others with unusual traits. Others the Empire has been watching, but not yet eliminated. If they could meet you, speak with you, perhaps we could find a solution that doesn't require exile or suppression. A trap? Admiral Harrison's voice asked through the comm system. No, ZYX said with certainty. Hope. The same thing Elena gave me when she found me broken and alone. Elena realized that the moment of decision had arrived. They could insist on safety, demand guarantees, try to protect ZYX from all possible harm. Or they could trust in the courage and wisdom of a young being who had already shown remarkable ability to inspire change in others. If we do this, Elena said carefully, I go with ZYX. And we maintain communication with Earth throughout the process. Agreed, Veltar said before Kethvar could object. The awakening requires witnesses to be real. Your presence would legitimize the process. As they prepared for what might be humanity's first peaceful diplomatic mission to a Draconian vessel, Elena couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come from that first distress call on a dead world. ZYX was no longer a frightened child needing rescue. They were becoming a leader, a bridge between the harsh realities of the present and the bright possibilities of the future. The stars outside the viewport seemed to pulse in rhythm with ZYX's star song, and Elena found herself believing that they were about to witness not just first contact, but the rebirth of a civilization that had forgotten how to dream. The interior of the Draconian warship was unlike anything Elena had expected. Instead of the sterile military efficiency she had imagined, the corridors hummed with a subtle musical resonance that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. ZYX walked beside her with growing confidence, their scales shifting to match the harmonics around them in a display that was both beautiful and profoundly alien. The ship is singing, ZYX explained softly as they followed Veltar through passages lined with crystalline formations that had never appeared in any human intelligence reports. It was built during the transition period, when the Empire was just beginning to suppress the old ways. They couldn't completely eliminate the harmonic architecture without rebuilding the entire fleet. Elena marveled at the implications. The Draconian Empire had been carrying the seeds of its own transformation within its very infrastructure, waiting for someone like ZYX to help them remember what they truly were. Veltar led them to a section of the ship that felt different, warmer somehow, despite the regulated atmosphere. The crystalline formations here were more elaborate, forming patterns that seemed to pulse with inner light. Other Draconians moved through these corridors, but Elena noticed they were smaller than the delegation they had met, their scales showing hints of the color variation that marked ZYX's heritage. The others, Veltar explained, catching Elena's observation. Those born with traits the Empire considers problematic. Officially, they are assigned to engineering and maintenance duties where their differences are considered less disruptive. But actually, Elena asked, they keep the ships running, a new voice said from behind them, because the old harmonic systems respond better to minds that can still hear the star songs. They turned to see a Draconian who was clearly female, her scales a deep burgundy that shifted to gold at the edges. Unlike the military delegation, she wore simple work clothes and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had long ago stopped apologizing for being different. Captain SYX Veltar said formally, May I present ZYX, the young singer, and their human guardian doctor, Elena Vasquez. SYX eyes fixed on ZYX with an intensity that made Elena's protective instinct stir. But the look wasn't predatory. It was wonder mixed with something that looked like profound relief. So small, SYX said softly. Yet the harmonics you generate reach across star systems. How? I don't try to be loud, ZYX replied with typical directness. I just stopped trying to be quiet. The simple statement seemed to hit the Draconian captain like a physical blow. Elena watched as SYX's scales began shifting color, cycling through patterns that spoke of emotions too complex for human understanding. Stop trying to be quiet, SYX repeated wonderingly. The conditioning protocols focus entirely on suppressing expression, never on whether suppression serves any real purpose. Show me, ZYX said gently. Show me what you've been hiding. Elena tensed, unsure what was about to happen. But SYXRN seemed to understand exactly what ZYX was asking for. The captain closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and did something that changed everything. She sang. It wasn't music in any human sense. The sound was harmonics that resonated through bone and sinew, frequencies that seemed to speak directly to parts of the mind Elena hadn't known existed. But more than that, the song carried meaning, emotions, memories that painted pictures in her consciousness. She saw the same crystal cities from ZYX's memory sharing, but through different eyes. She felt the joy of moving between worlds without ships, the profound connection of minds linked across interstellar distances, the deep satisfaction of healing rather than harming. When the song ended, Elena realized she was crying. Around them, a dozen other Draconians had emerged from nearby chambers, their scales bright with colors Elena was beginning to recognize as joy and hope. Beautiful, Elena whispered. It was beautiful. It was forbidden, SYXRN said, but her voice carried pride rather than shame. The High Command considers stellar harmonics a form of rebellion against proper military discipline. Because they are, said one of the others, a younger Draconian whose scales were shot through with silver like ZYX's. How can you maintain absolute control over people who can communicate mind to mind across any distance? ZYX moved to the center of the group, their small form somehow commanding the attention of beings 3 times their size. You don't have to choose between freedom and safety. Elena's people taught me that. You can be strong and wise and connected to each other. The humans accept difference? Another asked, their voice carrying years of suppressed hope. Elena found herself speaking not as a scientist, but as someone who had watched a traumatized child bloom into a confident young being. We don't just accept it, we celebrate it. Diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. Our greatest achievements come from different minds working together. SYXRN studied Elena with new interest. You would welcome us? Even knowing what we are capable of. Especially knowing what you're capable of, Elena replied. The universe needs healers and singers and beings who can reach across the void to touch other minds with compassion. The galaxy has had enough conquest. It's time for cooperation. The next few hours transformed Elena's understanding of the situation entirely. What she had assumed was a single ship with a handful of different Draconians turned out to be a network of vessels throughout the fleet, all connected by secret communications and shared purpose. SYXRN revealed that nearly 20% of the Empire's military showed signs of genetic throwback traits, most suppressed by neural conditioning but not eliminated. The conditioning weakens over time, SYXRN explained as they gathered in a chamber that had been converted into a meeting space, especially when exposed to strong harmonics like those the young singer produces. Some of us have been maintaining contact for years, planning for a moment like this. Planning what exactly? Elena asked. Exodus, said the silver-scaled younger one, who had introduced herself as KYXIRA. We cannot change the Empire from within. The High Command's control is too complete. But we can leave. Find a place where our children can grow up free to be what they truly are. Elena's mind raced. A draconian exodus would be a massive undertaking, requiring ships, resources, and safe destinations. But more than that, it would require protection from an empire that wouldn't simply allow a significant portion of its population to walk away. Where would you go? She asked. We had hoped you might help us answer that, Veltar said quietly. Human space offers the most advanced protection from empire retaliation, and your species seems to have solved the problem of multicultural cooperation. Elena looked at ZYX, seeing in those ancient young eyes the same courage that had sustained the child through abandonment and abuse. You're talking about requesting asylum for refugees. That's a huge political decision, but not impossible. SYXRN asked. Elena thought about Earth's history, about humanity's long struggle to learn that differences were strengths rather than threats. It hadn't been an easy lesson, and there had been failures along the way. But they had learned it eventually. Not impossible, she admitted. But It would require proof that you truly want peace, not just a tactical advantage. What kind of proof? KYXIRA asked. ZYX stepped forward, their scales bright with determination. We show them what we really are. All of us, together. We sing the star songs loud enough for your whole fleet to hear. We wake up everyone who's been hiding and show the universe what the draconian people can become. Elena's breath caught. What ZYX was proposing would be the equivalent of a mass awakening across multiple ships. The political and social implications would be staggering and dangerous. The High Command will consider that an act of rebellion, Veltar warned. Good, ZYX said simply, because that's exactly what it is. The decision was made in that moment, with the certainty that comes from recognizing inevitable truth. They would awaken the sleeping heritage of the Draconian fleet. They would show two civilizations what was possible when fear was replaced by hope. And they would do it together. The preparation took 3 days. SYXRN's network proved to be more extensive than Elena had imagined, reaching across 11 ships and involving hundreds of awakening Draconians. They coordinated timing, harmonics, and, most importantly, message content that would inspire rather than frighten those experiencing genetic memories for the first time. Elena found herself in a unique position of serving as cultural liaison, helping the awakening Draconians understand human concepts of cooperation while learning from them about the ancient ways their species had lost. The exchange was profound and moving, breaking down barriers that had seemed insurmountable just days before. When the moment came, Elena stood with ZYX and the others in the central chamber of SYXRN's ship, feeling the harmonic resonance building like an approaching storm. Across the fleet, hundreds of voices prepare to sing together for the first time in centuries. Ready? ZYX asked, their voice carrying the authority of someone far older than their physical years. Elena nodded, knowing that whatever happened next would change the galaxy forever. Around them, the awakened Draconians took their positions, scales bright with colors that hadn't been seen in Empire space since the ancient days. The song began as a whisper, individual voices finding each other across the void. But it grew, harmonics building on harmonics, until the very fabric of space seemed to vibrate with music that carried memory, hope, and the promise of transformation. Elena felt the moment when the awakening reached critical mass. Across the fleet, minds that had been conditioned to silence suddenly remembered how to sing. The effect cascaded from ship to ship like wildfire, awakening genetic memories that had been buried for generations. Through the ship's communication systems, they could hear the chaos beginning on vessels still under high command control. But it wasn't the chaos of rebellion. It was the chaos of rebirth. Thousands of Draconians were simultaneously remembering what they truly were, what they had been before fear transformed them into instruments of conquest. The star song reached Earth as well, carried by quantum resonances that human science was only beginning to understand. Elena smiled as she imagined Dr. Chun and the others experiencing this moment of transformation, witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. When the harmonics finally faded, the silence was profound. In that silence, they waited to see what the galaxy would do with the gift they had just given it. The response came within hours. Battlemaster Kethvar, speaking for what remained of the High Command's authority, offered formal surrender of the awakened ships to human protection. The political implications would take months to sort out, but the fundamental decision was made. The awakened Draconians would be granted sanctuary while they determined their ultimate fate. 6 months later, Elena stood in the observation dome of New Haven Station, watching ZYX play with a group of young, awakened Draconians in the zero-gravity recreational area. The children, for that's what they were, regardless of species, moved through space with the grace their ancestors had known, their scales bright with joy as they learned to sing to the stars. Regrets? Dr. Chin asked, joining Elena at the viewport. Elena smiled, watching as ZYX helped a particularly shy young one find their harmonic voice. How can you regret giving birth to hope? The awakened Draconian community was thriving on New Haven. their unique abilities contributing to advances in communication technology, healing techniques, and stellar navigation that benefited all species in the Alliance. More importantly, they were proving that the choice between strength and compassion was a false one. Beings could be both powerful and gentle, advanced and wise. The Empire is requesting formal negotiations, Dr. Chen said quietly. Apparently, the awakening didn't stop with the fleet. There are reports of spontaneous harmonic episodes across their territory. Elena nodded. They had known this would happen eventually. The star songs were contagious, spreading through quantum resonance and genetic memory in ways that no political boundary could contain. The Draconian Empire was going to have to choose between adapting to the change or being transformed by it. Will you serve as cultural advisor for the negotiations? Dr. Chen asked. Elena looked out at the stars, then down at ZYX, who was now teaching a group of human children how to harmonize with Draconian song patterns. The sight filled her with hope for a future where such cooperation was normal rather than extraordinary. We both will, Elena said. After all, this was never just about rescuing one abandoned child. It was about proving that love is stronger than fear, that acceptance is more powerful than control, and that sometimes the most important discoveries aren't found in distant stars. They're found in the courage to care for someone different from yourself. The universe stretched out before them, vast and full of possibilities. And somewhere in that immensity, other abandoned children waited for someone to hear their cries for help and choose love over fear. Elena smiled, knowing that thanks to ZYX and the Awakened Ones, the galaxy had become a place where such children would no longer wait alone in the dark. The star songs continued, carrying messages of hope and connection across the void, proving once and for all that the greatest force in the universe wasn't conquest or control. It was the simple, revolutionary act of choosing to care.